Hey, John. What are you working on?
I'm just working on the notes for this week's episode about The Shining.
Oh, okay, cool. The weatherman says there's a big snowstorm coming tonight.
What do you want me to do about it?
I was just letting you know. You don't have to be so grouchy about it.
I'm not being grouchy. It's just that every time you come in here, you distract me, and I just want to get this done.
All right. Understood. I'll leave you to it. I'll check in later. Maybe bring you a couple sandwiches.
How about whenever I'm in my office, if you hear me typing, or whether you don't hear me typing, you just stay out and leave me alone.
Okay. I'm sorry. Forget it.
You know what? Let's start right now. This is Open Mic Night of the Living Dead. The creature's creeping right behind you. I hope you finally find a little slice of peace and light. 'Cause it comes crashing down tonight. Welcome to the open mic. When we call your name, you'll die. But there's no need to dread. This is the open mic night of the living dead. Here's John.
And I'm Rachel.
Welcome to this week's episode of Open Mic Night of the Living Dead. I hope you enjoyed our introduction. We rehearsed that for 6 weeks, and it took about 127 takes, but we got through it.
You had a better Nicholson than I knew that you had.
I channeled it. You interrupting me gave me the rage. I don't know. I tapped into something.
Fair. That we can talk about that scene when we get there, but no, that was good. That was good. You channeled that performance. I'm excited to talk about this movie on our podcast.
If you didn't catch our encore episode for the Slumber Party Massacre last week, we announced that for The Shining, we've decided to split it into 2 parts. So this week is going to be part 1, and then next week, part 2, obviously.
I'm glad you cleared that up, though. That could be confusing. This is our first 2-part episode.
Yeah, and we don't intend to do this a lot, but we figured after a couple of the other deep dives for some of these richer films that have a lot of interesting things to talk about, that this would be better for us and for you, hopefully.
This will allow us to cover this film in depth the same way that we do all of the films that we cover, but not have to worry about kind of cutting out. And this film just has so much in it. So I think this was a good decision.
We'll see. We'll probably get 20 minutes in and realize we're almost done.
Okay.
As always, spoiler alert, this is a deep dive episode. We're going to be going into lots and lots of stuff about The Shining. If you haven't seen it yet, well, that confuses me. But if you don't want any spoilers and you want to watch it before you listen, then give this a pause, go do that, and join us again in 2.5 hours or so. But otherwise, we're happy you're here with us, and this is The Shining.
A few content warnings for today. This movie does talk a lot about alcoholism, about domestic violence, child abuse, so there's some pretty heavy topics. So we will be getting into that as the film covers those, both on screen and potentially off screen. We'll be talking about that. And also additional spoiler warning for Stephen King's The Shining, because I think we will be talking about the book as well, at least a few ways in which it differs.
Yeah, so if you haven't read that, pause this.
Come back.
No. Another sort of warning I wanted to give, which is not a content warning or a spoiler warning, and I'm not sure it's really a warning whatsoever, but
I am so intrigued.
This movie especially has so much lore and myths surrounding it that, like, the myths surrounding this movie are as big, if not bigger than this movie, or the production of this movie. And the reality is that a lot of the conspiracies or sort of the theories about this movie, a lot of them come from interpretations. And even as I've been doing research, I've come across contradicting information and all those sorts of things. So we're going to do the absolute best we can. There's a million different places where they've covered this. I think there are some pretty strong definitive works that we don't have access to yet these days. But yeah, so we're trying our best, and we'll sort of give you our opinion on some of the lore as we go along.
Right, and I will also put some of our references, some of our sources in the show notes if you'd like to dig deeper into this. This is one of those ones that has just a ton. I don't think you introduced us in what we do usually. If this is your first episode listening to us, we're married, and we met at an open mic a long time ago. And so we really love horror movies, and we talk about them, and then we sing songs about them. So
we won't be playing any songs in this part 1 episode of The Shining. Our shining songs, our bright shining songs will be in part 2. With all of that out of the way, do you have a summary of this film?
I do have a summary of this film. Spoilers begin here. A recovering alcoholic writer takes a job as an off-season caretaker of an isolated mountain resort hotel, bringing his wife and young psychic son. As winter cuts them off from the outside world, the hotel's dark history asserts itself, and the line between supernatural evil and a man's own unraveling becomes impossible to find.
True story. Well, maybe not. I bet it's happened before.
Probably, in some way, shape, or form.
And it'll happen again. Do you have any memories of sort of your first experience with this movie?
I watched it many, many years ago, probably in college, when I first started really trying to increase my knowledge of horror. I remember it hit me not great because I am a huge Stephen King fan and had read the book and loved the book, and this is so different from the book that I was kind of like, that was weird. I watched it again with you a year or two ago and had just read the book. So that was a very different experience than this, which must be my third or fourth time. There may be another time in there somewhere, but this time I had a very different experience of the movie, being a year or two out from reading the book and really seeing it standing on its own. So I think this movie you could watch 100 times and continue to find new stuff out and notice new things, which is why we're here for so long.
And that touches kind of on what I was going to say. I don't have a clear memory of the first time I saw this, which is not always the case with a lot of the movies we watch for this show, but I would imagine the latest I would have seen it would have been in college, somewhere along the way. I would imagine the first time I watched it, I knew how big it was, or how important it was sort of in the film world. And I don't think that it had a huge impact on me the first time, probably partially because I was younger and had less film knowledge and film watching experience. But it really is a movie, and I think we've said this about a couple of other movies, but it's really true with this one. And as funny as I did research, I saw other people saying this as well. It's like the more you watch it, the more you love it. And it's, aside from the fact that there's always something to discover, it just kind of settles more and more into your bones.
Yeah, I really was pleased by how much I enjoyed it this most recent watching. And I look forward to watching it again, which is not always the case. I'm usually in search of novelty, so I don't love rewatching movies. And this one, I look forward to the next watch.
Let's do it.
Okay.
We'll go watch it right now.
No, we can do something new.
I actually considered watching it again since we watched it a couple of nights ago, but ran out of time. This movie was released in the United States on May 23rd, 1980. It was directed and produced by a gentleman named Stanley Kubrick. He's directed a few films that people might know. We'll get into that a bit later. He also produced the film. He co-wrote the screenplay with Diane Johnson. And of course, this film is based on the 1977 novel by Stephen King, as Rachel mentioned. The original cut and the sort of the usual cut you get, especially in the United States, has a runtime of 144 minutes, 146 minutes. I think it's 144 after they made the final cut of the very final scene. But there's also a European cut that has significantly lower runtime of about 119 minutes. So just around 2 hours flat.
I didn't realize the movie came out so soon after the book. Like I knew the dates on both of them, but I'm only now in this moment realizing that's only 3 years apart. Like that was and he worked on this for a long time, the movie anyway. So he must have started like super soon. I know we'll get to that, but that just struck me for the first time.
Yeah, only about a year after they would have started filming.
Wow.
The film was distributed by Warner Brothers and produced on a budget of approximately $19 million in 1980. And it grossed around roughly between 45 to 47 million worldwide, making it a moderate financial success, but it was not a blockbuster relative to the expectations for a Kubrick film at that time. In today's dollars, that's like a budget of 75 million with a box office of around 194 million. So, definitely made its money back and did well that way. But I think Kubrick was hoping for a much bigger success, especially because this movie followed his film Barry Lyndon, which is also, quite well regarded, but did not make a very big splash at the box office. And this movie was not a major awards contender when it came out. Really, this movie received a lot of negative attention when it first came out. And I would even say, we often say it had, there was a mixed critical reception. I would say this even leans more towards the negative. Is that what you found?
That's what I saw, yeah, which was really surprising. I was surprised that Nicholson didn't even receive a nomination for his performance, because this performance is wild. And that really blew my mind. I think while we were watching it, I was like, oh, he must have been nominated for an Academy Award. And I didn't realize.
Nope.
No nominations. That's crazy.
Obviously, over time, the film has undergone substantial reevaluation and is now widely considered one of the most important horror films ever made. And back in 2018, it was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Are you keeping account over there of all the movies that we've covered so far?
I'm not, but I could do that pretty quickly.
We'll have to start a count. We need like one of those chalkboards.
Ooh, yeah, definitely.
You can put lots of things on it and then take pictures of it, put it on the internet.
Oh, there's an idea.
Looking at the reception back in 1980, many reviewers expressed frustration with the film's emotional distance, its lack of traditional horror structure, its ambiguity and refusal to explain itself, which is something that Kubrick really likes to do in his films. So if you hate that, you might not be a big Kubrick fan. I'm not opposed to an ambiguous film here and there, and in fact, I quite enjoy it.
I'm nodding my head vigorously over here in agreement with you.
That's nice. I thought that you were trying to shake off something off your head.
Nope.
But over time, the film has been critically reassessed and is now frequently ranked among the greatest horror films ever made. It's considered one of Kubrick's most studied and analyzed works, and it's recognized as a landmark in atmospheric and psychological horror. In terms of some of the negative reviews that it received, Janet Maslin of the New York Times wrote, "Something has gone wrong with The Shining. It is not very scary." And we can talk about that a bit later. Variety described the film as a film that works on a few levels but fails on others. Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune wrote, "It's a pretty big disappointment." And Pauline Kael of The New Yorker criticized the film for being emotionally remote and lacking audience involvement. Even when acknowledging the film's technical craftsmanship, many critics found it emotionally inaccessible and structurally unsatisfying.
What?
Yeah.
What? Emotionally inaccessible? Say what you will. How the hell was that emotionally inaccessible?
I think there was something about this movie that maybe was ahead of its time. I'm not I don't think I've done enough critical film assessment to put my finger on it necessarily. Maybe, I don't know, you're smarter like that.
I wonder if it has to do with how close it came to the book coming out. And so everybody was really connected to the book because Stephen King everybody read all of his stuff, right? Like he was the most famous author in the country, at least.
Well, this was only his third novel, though.
Oh, that's true. But Carrie was such a huge hit. And De Palma's Carrie had come out at that point, right?
Right.
And then what was his second book?
Salem's Lot.
There it is. Had that, and that came out in 1978, right? Or
TV.
The TV movie. So there had been 2 adaptations that I don't know how well they did. So this is his.
I think Carrie must have done really well, and that might be why this sold so quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really interesting. I know I didn't enjoy it last time we watched it as much because I had just read the book and the differences were so glaring to me. And this time was a very different experience. So I wonder if culturally, and also a lot of the themes which we'll talk about are really uncomfortable. And so maybe I think a lot more people today are familiar with domestic violence and abusive relationships and those dynamics, which is, for me, what makes this movie scary. And maybe that was just coming to the forefront of society in 1980. And so maybe that's why people were just like, oh, I can't relate to this if they had never experienced that kind of thing before.
Well, one of our old critic buddies did a full 180 on his assessment, and that's Roger Ebert. When it first came out, he did review the film, but did not elevate it among Kubrick's best works. His reaction aligned with critics who found the film, again, emotionally distant and less engaging than expected. But then in 2006, released his Great Movies series and very clearly reevaluated the film. He wrote, "The Shining grows in power with repeated viewings." And Kubrick's film is not about ghosts, but about madness and isolation. And I think at one point he called it, either one of the top 50 or top 100 greatest films of all time. So I think that is like his reassessment really is sort of like an analogy for everybody else's reassessment, it seems like.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I agree with him. I don't usually agree with a lot of what he has to say, but this time, right on, sir.
Well, and another thing to keep in mind, too, was sort of where the horror genre was at the time. If you were going out into the theaters in 1980 and you were going to see maybe another horror film, you could see Friday the 13th, The Fog, Prom Night, Terror Train, Maniac, The Changeling, and then Lucio Fulci's City of the Living Dead, which is the first of his Gates of Hell trilogy. And then from Dario Argento, you had Inferno, which was his follow-up to Suspiria.
Wow, very different vibe movies, except maybe...
Changeling.
Yeah.
The Changeling was a much more straight-up sort of haunted house movie. I love The Changeling.
That's with the pianist?
Yes, George C. Scott is a songwriter. His family dies, and he goes into rents this house to get away from it all and work on new compositions or whatever. But he's not necessarily alone in the house. I have to go rewatch that one. Some other movies that came out in 1980 real quick. A little movie called The Empire Strikes Back. Raging Bull. Airplane, which I watched recently. American Gigolo. I almost said Gigolo. That's how it looks. Private Benjamin, and The Blues Brothers.
It actually came out on the same day as Empire Strikes Back. So it still did okay, obviously, but not smashingly. But yeah, there was a lot of good movies that came out that year. And particularly all those horror movies that you listed, very different vibe from this.
Yeah, I mean, the horror landscape, especially in the United States at that time, was really kind of in the boom of the slasher film. Halloween had come out in 1978, 2 years before this. And so everybody was sort of riding that terror train.
I love Terror Train. It's such a fun movie.
There's a 4K release coming out soon, so you just hold on tight.
Purdy. It's going to be so good.
And there are some connections with this film as well that I will mention much later. But that is sort of all I have on the distribution. What do you see there in the ratings world?
So ratings, I think, represent the later perspective on this film as opposed to kind of the early one. IMDb, it's an 8.4. Rotten Tomatoes, 84% critics, 93% audience. Metacritic was 61, but I think that was Metacritic at launch. So I think that was the gap between the reception then and then the current reputation. Letterboxd is a 4.2. I thought it would be slightly higher on Letterboxd, but again, I really think and I don't want us to sound like a broken record, but so many of these movies have hit us harder as we've gotten older and have a deeper understanding of the genre. And I wonder.
And repeat watches.
And like understanding, I don't know, I understand movies visually much better now. And I think that's such a huge piece. The vibes are such a huge piece of this movie.
Yeah.
And if you were watching this on a tiny little TV screen in 1999, like I did for the first time on my little 20-inch combo TV VCR in my dorm room, not the same thing. You're not going to get everything.
Although compared to it, you would have been watching everything like that. And something interesting is that Kubrick, in filming this movie, kept that in mind in his framing.
Oh, no way.
So he kind of framed it both for widescreen theatrical release and knowing that now movies were being aired on television, he sort of framed it for that as well, which was pretty interesting.
Oh, really cool. My personal score for this is a 4.5 out of 5. This is just almost perfect. Almost perfect for me.
Yeah, and I gave it a 9 out of 10, which, if you do the math, is the same exact score, which we don't always do.
Amazing.
But yeah.
We're pretty close on most things, but I'm not surprised both of us rank this really highly. That's really, really cool.
I love this movie. What would you say on our 3-tier scale, which is sort of our recommendation scale for the listeners overall? 1 being trash, you don't need to see it. 2 encompasses like the greatest majority of films, pretty darn good. We'd watch it again, but, not necessarily game-changing. And 3 is sort of the elite tier. I think I know where this falls.
I mean, a 3, obviously.
Yeah, we didn't even need to waste our time with that. Go see it if you haven't seen it. This is a game changer.
And if it doesn't hit you the first time and you're like, I don't get it, then just give it another try.
Yeah.
It really does. Or if it's been years since you've watched it and it didn't really hit you that hard, maybe you were in your 20s then and maybe you're in your 40s now. You should try it again.
Yeah. And let it sit with you for a bit and come back and revisit it again later. It's so good. We've introduced everything. We've checked out the distribution. Should we make a movie?
Let's make a movie.
Let's make a movie. We'll make sure that it's spooky. I sure hope that it's groovy. Let's make a movie.
All right.
Okay.
This section's Let's Make a Movie.
Yay.
Pretty self-explanatory. Let me tell you first about some of the personnel involved in this film. And I'm not talking about a lot of people today, but, some of the big players here. And obviously, the number one big player is Mr. Stanley Kubrick himself. And it's probably unlikely we're going to cover another Kubrick movie for quite some time, but he was born in 1928 in New York City. And he's widely regarded as one of the most important filmmakers in cinema history, at least by some, or many, I'm not sure. Before filmmaking, Kubrick worked as a photographer for Look magazine, where he developed a strong sense of composition, visual storytelling through images, and attention to spatial relationships. And this background really shaped his approach to cinema fundamentally. Kubrick approached film as a visual medium first, rather than a dialogue-driven one. And I'm probably going to hit on that point a couple of times as we're going along, because I think that notion helps to kind of sort of blend some of the theories that are out there about how he did what he did and why he did what he did, because he really was really focused on the frame. And I think Rachel, there was one point we had to pause the movie and I was like, look at that shot. And Rachel was like, you pause at any moment in this film, you're going to get a shot that nice.
Yeah, 100%. Every shot is just so beautiful.
And in terms of filmmaking, Kubrick was largely self-taught. He entered filmmaking by independently financing short documentaries. He learned directing, editing, and cinematography through direct practice. He did not come through the traditional Hollywood studio system, which contributed to his independence, his technical experimentation, and his desire for complete creative control, which is a big thing when you're talking about Stanley Kubrick and his movies and how he worked. For better or worse, he really had his hands in most aspects of the filmmaking in more ways than most directors, I would say, are.
Yeah, that sounds about right, given what I learned about him as we were digging into this movie.
And Kubrick's films often explore control versus chaos, human fragility, and systems breaking down under pressure. And I've got some blind spots. I love Kubrick movies. I don't know why I haven't just sat down and watched them all, because I'm sure I would love all the ones I haven't seen yet. The ones I'm most familiar with are 2001: Space Odyssey, Clockwork Orange, this film, and Eyes Wide Shut. But I've never seen Full Metal Jacket. Maybe I'll watch it tonight.
Ooh, Full Metal Jacket was one of my first VHS tapes, that and Clockwork Orange. I bought those my freshman year of college when I had the aforementioned TV VCR combo. I haven't seen it in years, but really loved both of those movies quite a bit when I was younger. I think I had The Shining on VHS too. There wasn't even really an internet back then to tell me that Kubrick was big, but I must have been like, oh, I need to watch these movies. And so I bought them. There might be in a box in the basement somewhere.
And there really is sort of, even though the movies are all very different, he sort of covered all the different genres in a way, but his work typically always reflects photographic discipline, architectural framing, and psychological storytelling. And he's often associated, though indirectly, with visual traditions like German Expressionism, which we've heard about several other directors, right? Along the way, I feel like we need to be getting more into some of this German Expressionism to learn a little bit more of the foundation that we're talking about here.
That may be the nerdiest thing you've ever said.
Yes.
We need to get more into German Expressionism.
I'm sure I've said way nerdier stuff.
I love it. I know I have, but usually I'm the biggest nerd. Not today.
The three films of his leading up to The Shining was 2001: A Space Odyssey in 1968, A Clockwork Orange in 1971, and Barry Lyndon in 1975. These films all demonstrate technical innovation, strong visual identity, and the willingness to challenge audience expectations.
I don't know anything about Barry Lyndon.
I was reading a bit about it today. I mean, I've only heard good things.
Oh, I'm sure. I just don't even know what kind of movie it is or what it's about or who's in it, but that's okay.
After Barry Lyndon, Kubrick sought to make a horror film and explored multiple novels before selecting The Shining. Now, one of those stories, it's even on the Wikipedia page, I have heard is not true, that basically he was going through all these books and he would, if he didn't like what he was reading, he basically had a stack of horror books. If he didn't like what he was reading, he'd toss it back into the pile. It would smack into the wall. And his assistant or secretary or whomever said she knew he had finally hit upon the book that he was interested in because she hadn't heard a book smash into the wall in a really long time. And that book was The Shining. I've heard that story might not be completely accurate. It might have to do more with the fact that Warner Brothers had several novels that they had the rights to. And this was among those. And I think Kubrick was supposed to make the movie with Warner Brothers, something along those lines. It doesn't matter. It's a great story. I hope that that's what really happened. But it's one of those ones that I've heard this many years later from some people who had some pretty close access that might not be so true.
Does beg the question that if he liked the book so much, why'd he change it so much?
I think this is a great example if you're trying to explain to someone the difference between plot and story. The plot of the two films, not the two films, but But the plot of the book and the movie, although there's a couple major plot points that are different, the plot is pretty similar. The story is more different than the plot. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. And it reminds me of a more recent comparison where people are comparing From Dusk Till Dawn to Sinners, which I have talked about a little bit. But like those, so let me make sure I understand it. So there's similar plots. There are plot points that are similar between those two movies, for example, but the story is very, very different. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, and The Shining is even better example. In both the book and the movie, a family goes to take care of a hotel, and there's some like ghostly things that happen.
Yes.
Jack starts losing his mind and finally attacks his family.
Right, but the stories are very different. The stories they're trying to tell, the questions they're asking, all those things. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, watching The Shining and realizing the difference between the book and the movie was what made me think that about From Dusk Till Dawn and Sinners, because I was like, oh, it's the same thing. Like they have it's a similar structure and the same things kind of happen, but it's not the same story at all. It doesn't leave you feeling the same way. It doesn't leave you asking those questions.
I would even say there's plenty of difference in the plot.
Way, way more between the two vampire movies. Yeah, 100%. Like than in this movie. This movie and book combo are much, much closer. But I've been thinking about that concept a lot, but I hadn't put together the plot and the story bit. So thank you for that. I think that's a really good way to look at it and a good way to explain it. But also maybe why this movie is misunderstood sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and he was drawn to the contained setting. He likes to explore psychological aspects of storytelling. So he really liked the psychological deterioration of Jack Torrance, the idea of environment influencing behavior. His adaptation emphasizes more ambiguity and atmosphere. This movie is so atmospheric. And also inevitability, which obviously you're going to get more into the themes next week. In terms of the writing, for the screenwriting, once I talk about this, is this where you were planning on doing book comparison?
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And I don't know if that's now or if you would rather talk about, maybe now just because between Kubrick and King, there's.
Well, let me just tell you about Diane Johnson first.
Perfect. Tell me.
Because he brought her on to help him write the screenplay for the film. She's an American novelist and critic with a background in literary fiction and academia. And Kubrick brought her in to help develop psychological depth, character relationships, and the narrative structure. I saw part of an interview with her in sort of a making of featurette where she was saying that her original draft had more Wendy. She really sympathized with Wendy, but they sort of cut some of that in later drafts. But during the writing process, the screenplay was developed collaboratively, but Kubrick maintained primary control, as per usual. Really, Kubrick was responsible for shaping the structure, the pacing, the tone, and sort of the ambiguity. And Johnson contributed psychological insight, dialogue refinement, literary grounding, and sort of the intellectual framework of it. So that's sort of what I have on Kubrick's collaboration with Johnson in their adaptation of the screenplay.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wasn't super familiar with, I'm not familiar with her at all, actually. So Kubrick versus King, I did write a few things down. So Stephen King notoriously has called this the only film of his work that he remembers hating. Although he did say in Danse Macabre in 1981, so just the year later, that even a maddening, perverse, and disappointing Kubrick film retains a brilliance that is inarguable. So he still recognized how good this film was, even though it went really far away from his vision. His main objections were that Nicholson was not a good choice for Jack Torrance. There was no arc of descent, which I think is a valid criticism if you were trying to make a film of the story. that the alcoholism, while it played a role, was stripped down. That was a really huge part of King's book. And it certainly is a part here. We'll talk more about that in themes. And also the characterization of Wendy. He really, I think that is the biggest one that we keep running into, that Wendy as kind of a helpless victim is not the same Wendy from the book. And the portrayal of Wendy in the film really upset him. And that makes sense given the depth and the direction of the characters in the book, which again, I've read maybe a year and a half ago, so I'm not quite as up to date on it as I was the last time we watched this. There's an anecdote that I don't know how true it is. It was kind of, I could not find a primary source for this, but there's a story that Kubrick called King at 3:00 in the morning and said, "Do you believe in God?" King said yes, and Kubrick slammed the phone down, yelling, "I knew it." So that's kind of an interesting story. Did you hear that? Did you find that story?
I did, but there was like more to the conversation.
Okay, that was the only part. I just saw it like in a thing, about a thing. So I'm
don't
not sure.
remember exactly where I saw it either, but it was something about, one of them said, I think it was Kubrick to King. So the story goes, said something like, well, isn't there some like a bit of hope in a ghost story where, you know, that when you die, that there's something beyond that? And King said something like, well, what if you end up in hell? And Kubrick saying, I don't believe in hell. And so at that point, like, they did not have any more theological discussions.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, so this is, you know, widely, King did write his own screenplay, which had been rejected for this film. And then there was a 1997 TV miniseries that much more closely follows the book, which generally was not well regarded compared to this. But you cannot compare them because, again, they're telling two different stories. The major differences between the book, there's a lot of differences between the book and the movie, and I'm going to talk about some of those later in themes. But I think the biggest one is who lives and who dies. Halloran survives in the book, and that's a really big change.
He was actually, in one of the earlier drafts, he was going to be a bad guy in the movie.
Oh, wow. That would have been even crazier.
Like I don't know sort of exactly what depth, but by the end, I don't know if he's overtaken by the hotel or if we find out that he...
Oh, wow.
You know, was always sort of working for the hotel.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. I think the biggest difference, as someone who's read both the book and seen the movie within the last couple of years, I think for me, the obviously the story beats are different. I think the biggest change is there's a lot of internal monologue and dialogue with the hotel in the book that is not in the movie. So... because you can't, because movies and books are different genres. You can't, they're different forms of media, rather. And so you cannot.
I'm glad you fixed that.
Thank you.
I know I make mistakes that you let go, and you sometimes make mistakes I let go.
And you were like, oh no, I'm going to have to correct her. Yeah, they're different forms of media.
Different mediums.
Different media, because media is the plural of medium. See? Books and movies are different. You can't show somebody's internal monologue in a movie, and you don't have as much time to show all of that. So I think that difference means that the Jack Torrance, I think there's an argument could be made that Jack Torrance of the film is closer to the Jack Torrance of the book, but we have no way to know what he's thinking, and so we don't know. And so I think as someone who likes both of them, for me, it's very much like Lord of the Rings. I love the movies and I love the book, but they're very different. They're not the same thing. And I think that I am so happy that Kubrick made this movie the way that he did. And I'm so glad that Stephen King wrote the book the way that he did, because they're both fantastic. And I like both Wendy's, which might surprise you if you know how I usually feel about weaker women on screen. But the Wendy in the book, much stronger than the Wendy in the movie. But I like them both. So we'll talk more about that when we talk about characters. But yeah, I think it's a really neat, there's not many director author conversations that we are like witness to that we can talk about in this way. I can't think of another one off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm sure they're out there, but I can't come up with one off the dome.
Very, very cool.
I'm going to mention a couple more of the other filmmakers as we go along later, but why don't you tell me about this cast?
Yes, let's start with Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance. Jack Nicholson, I think, is probably one of the most famous actors of the last century, and this one as well. He was born in 1937. He's super old. I didn't realize he was that old. He was born in New Jersey. Interesting tidbit, believed that his mother was his sister until he was 37 and didn't learn the truth until after both had died. So I know we know lots of musicians and actors and comedians generally have difficult pasts, but you got to wonder how much of that kind of played in. His film debut was a Roger Corman movie, The Crybaby Killer in 1958. And his breakthrough role was in Easy Rider in 1969. We do not have very much fluency in movies from this time period. Maybe someday we'll have time. He had a Best Actor Oscar for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 1975, which was right after Chinatown in 1974. So he was a superstar by this time already. He was Kubrick's first choice immediately. Kubrick called his acting on par with Spencer Tracy and Jimmy Cagney, which I can't say anything because I haven't seen many movies with those gentlemen. There were other actors considered, which would have, of course, changed this movie. Nicholson's portrayal of Torrance is, completely unique. But De Niro was considered, Robert De Niro, although I guess he was considered not psychotic enough after Taxi Driver. And then I also saw that Robin Williams was considered, but it was too psychotic after Mork and Mindy. Or the role was not psychotic enough for De Niro after Taxi Driver, and it was too psychotic for Robin Williams after he'd been on Mork and Mindy. This is hearsay. Again, medium confidence. Some of these things it's really hard to find things for, but I thought that was kind of an interesting. Can you imagine Robin Williams in that role?
I actually kind of can.
Of all the people,
I'd like to see that, but I can't imagine that he was. I don't think he had enough weight at that time to even be considered by Kubrick, but who knows?
I don't think he had the range, right? Like he just was very fun. He was a comedian.
Yeah.
And Nicholson had
sitcom guy.
Yeah, he was just, yeah. So Stephen King did not like Jack Nicholson, thought he already looked unhinged, as I mentioned. No arc of gradual descent. Some of the most famous scenes in the film have to do with Nicholson's choices. So the infamous "Here's Johnny" line was improvised based on Ed McMahon's Tonight Show intro. I don't know if this is true or not. It says Kubrick had no idea what it meant.
Yeah.
That was, okay, so you saw that too.
He had been, I guess, he's sort of like the flip of Alfred Hitchcock. I think
yes,
he kind of went over to England and was doing a lot of work there, sort of living over there. And so he wasn't that familiar with Johnny Carson, supposedly, as the story goes, and only found out about its significance after the fact.
Oh, interesting.
But I guess Jack had, one of the other lines he improvised for that scene was, "Honey, I'm home," like from Lucy.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine anything else.
Not in this timeline. This is the one that happened in this timeline. I also found another probably not true story, but that's really a cool story, was that he ate only cheese sandwiches, which was his least favorite food, for 2 weeks so that he would be irritable during filming.
Well, I heard that Kubrick made him eat cheese sandwiches, knowing that he didn't like them, at least during shooting, to get that irritability out of him, to get that more disgust. Because he really, along with his anger, he portrays sort of like a disgust, right?
Oh, total disgust. We will talk more about this when we get to the character, because Jack Nicholson is an actor, and I don't want to blame him for how Jack Torrance makes me feel, but really effective, whatever sandwiches he was eating. Also, I like cheese sandwiches. I haven't had one in years, but
I was going to say, who eats cheese sandwiches anymore?
When I was little, I did back in the 80s, and it was pretty normal.
Well, what's funny, I was thinking that as I was preparing for this show, and at one point this afternoon, I went to the grocery store, and literally when I was waiting for my meats to be trimmed, there was an older couple talking about cheese sandwiches.
No way.
And I was like,
Dude,
get out of here.
Maybe I'll have a cheese sandwich tomorrow or something.
But
Maybe.
Well, yeah, you stay away. Keep your fingers off my trim meats.
I'll leave the meats alone and have my. Did you have cheese sandwiches as a kid?
I'm sure I've had cheese sandwiches, but no, that wasn't like a go-to sandwich.
I think I know that my family had less money when I was very young. And so we had cheese sandwiches it was cheese and butter on bread. And so I think that was probably a very affordable meal. I have not had one in a long time, though. So Jack Nicholson, I think, again, I have been hit so many times lately with the internet not being correct or contradicting itself. So one of the websites that I saw said that he was the most nominated male actor in Oscar history with 12 nominations and 3 wins. And he's basically been retired since 2010, and he declined an opportunity to be in Dr. Sleep. So
I think he declines a lot of opportunities.
He also was born in 1937, which I've not been doing good with math or English, apparently. I've not been doing well with math lately, but that would make him 89, right? He'll turn 89 this year if he was born in 37. So yeah, he is up there, man. Let's move on to Shelley Duvall, who played Wendy Torrance. Again, this is such a role. She was discovered at a Houston party in 1970 by Robert Altman, and then she was cast in the movie Brewster McCloud, which I know nothing about. She collaborated with Altman on a few films, McCabe and Mrs. Miller in 1971, Nashville in 1975, and Three Women in 1977. And she did win Best Actress at Cannes for Three Women. I don't know any of these movies at all. And I don't think I've ever seen Shelley Duvall in anything else. So, have you?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Kubrick saw her in Three Women and knew immediately. The quote is, "You need someone who is mousy and vulnerable." And oh boy, did she fit the bill for that understanding of the character of Wendy. The biggest thing that I ran into while researching, and I know you did as well, was that production, the claim being that production was deliberately brutal. Kubrick filmed the movie in sequence, so exhaustion kind of accumulated. He told the cast and crew not to sympathize with her after she fainted on set. I know that this may or may not be true. We did watch a little bit of the documentary, The Making of, that was made by Kubrick's daughter, and saw some of that, but I think it was hard to tell whether it was just capturing a little bit of like friendly frenemy banter between the two, or if it was actually...
Well, I don't know if now's a good time to talk about it. I had some of this stuff in production, which I'll save a lot of it.
Okay.
I saw a lot of things. Last night was the first night that I've ever seen that documentary shot by Vivian Kubrick, his daughter.
Yeah.
And I've heard several stories that seem to have come from that. And I could tell that some of the context was a little bit questionable, that people have jumped to conclusions from some of the things that happened, because he did say at one point in that, and it was during a moment of more banter, like, don't be sympathetic with her.
Right. And I guess the context is, well, was that just him joking because he thought she was overreacting, or was there something deeper to that?
Well, and I have no doubt that he put her through hell, but I don't think the impression that I get from many sources is that it wasn't like an abuse level of hell. It was a very strenuous shoot. It took way longer than it was supposed to, and he's very demanding as a director, but most people, once they're out of it, really appreciate it. They might not in the moment. And even Shelley Duvall in that documentary, she was like, I resented him so much during the shoot, but now I love him as a director and as a person. I don't know how I come down on that, only because this is a movie about an abusive relationship. And so, yeah, I don't think we have enough information or context to be able to make a call one way or another. But that is a piece of this that I think that was a big part of Duvall's participation in the film. I mean, she did say, from May until October, I was really in and out of ill health. Stanley pushed me and prodded me farther than I've ever been pushed before. There's lots of directors who are crummy, especially to their actresses. And so, you know, there's so much about this film in particular that has been said, and there's myth on top of myth and all of that. I am feeling very sympathetic towards both Wendy and Shelley right now after our viewing of that film and where it hit me. Well, and not trying to defend him. Again, I wasn't there, but also I do think that it's art, and you do. I don't know. Maybe it's a debate for an encore episode sometime. Like, what is an acceptable way to get the performances that you're looking for, or what have you? And I will. So there was a book that came out a couple of years ago. I don't have the book. I want to get the book so bad. It looks so cool. It's basically the definitive making of The Shining, and it was one of the people who put it together did research for over 10 years on it was Lee Unkrich, who's the director of Toy Story 3 and Coco. And basically, he had rooms in his house. I heard an interview with him, and he's basically had the most access in our contemporary times to sort of the estate and everything, and the resources that do still exist. And he's somebody who's come out and said that a lot of things have been exaggerated, but what was not exaggerated was that it was hell. It was strenuous as all get up. But at the end of the day, this is what the result was.
Yeah, no, she very, very true. So that is a piece that we don't know the answer to, but I think is important about her participation in this film. One of these myths, also disputed by Unkrich, was that the baseball bat staircase scene, which is terrifying and scary, took 127 takes. But the Steadicam operator, Garrett Brown, claims that it was actually 35 or 45 times, which is still a lot of times. I hate doing multiple takes when we're recording.
You would never even sign
I
up.
would never even. I could not. I get so frustrated if we have to do like 3 takes.
And I'm going to get into takes.
Okay, cool. That was one of the pieces that she was involved in that supports your theory that perhaps this was exaggerated. Shelley Duvall was nominated for Worst Actress Razzie for her role in this, but that was rescinded in 2022. They took it back. And so I think, again, as the film has gained more notoriety and more appreciation, she played Olive Oil in Altman's Popeye.
That I might have seen.
Yeah, I don't know if I did. Ebert said she was born to play the role in that year. She created and produced Fairy Tale Theater and then withdrew from Hollywood in the mid-90s. She did appear on Dr. Phil in 2016. That appearance was, no? Or are you shaking your head?
I've heard about it.
Oh, yeah.
And it sounds like it was really exploitative.
It was widely criticized as very exploitative, yes. And her final role was in an indie horror film, The Forest Hills, in 2023. And she did pass away in 2024 from complications from diabetes at age 75. And I saw a few things of her, I think, like on social media, like some interviews and some talks with her. But yeah, that interview with Dr. Phil was real bad. And yeah, that's Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall.
And then two actors who played characters named the same as them. So Danny Lloyd plays Danny Torrance. The first choice for the film was Carrie Guffey, who was in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Is that right?
On my I have my copy of that movie next to the player. Like one of these nights.
Amazing.
When I have time for it.
Yeah, but his parents said no because the film was too gruesome. So then Kubrick sent casting agents to Chicago, Denver, and Cincinnati to audition over 5,000 boys for the role. He was only 6 years old. He was cast for his unusual ability to concentrate for long periods of time. Yeah, this kid did an amazing job. Kubrick protected him throughout the filming. Lloyd believed that he was making a family drama and did not know all of the details of the movie. And then supposedly Kubrick sent Christmas cards to him and his family for many years afterwards.
Yeah, I heard that they had a really good relationship.
Yeah.
That, despite all the rumors about Kubrick.
He was good with the kiddo. Yeah. He only had one more role after this. He played a young G. Gordon Liddy in a 1982 movie, and then he walked away from acting, and now he teaches biology at a community college in Kentucky. And he did have a brief cameo in Dr. Sleep as a baseball game spectator.
Cool.
Yeah. We've got Dick Halloran, played by Scatman Crothers. Scatman Crothers started his music career at 15 as a drummer in a speakeasy in the 20s.
That sounds amazing.
I know.
I mean, I'm sure it was really awful and rough.
He reportedly performed for Al Capone and named himself Scatman in the 1930s. So he played the voice of Scat Cat in the Aristocats. He had Hong Kong Phooey and Jazz the Autobot in the Transformers cartoon. So he had a lot of voice acting work. He played Louis the Garbage Man on Chico and the Man for 4 years. This was his 4th film with Jack Nicholson. He was also in King of Marvin Gardens, The Fortune, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which I didn't know. I saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest like once, maybe in college, and I barely remember it. But Crothers said he wanted to play Halloran before production even started.
And I think it was Jack that brought him on as well, because I think originally
cool. I didn't see that.
They were originally thinking of Slim Pickens for the role, which sounds like another, like I could get Slim Pickens and Scatman Crothers, those names mixed up in my head so quick.
Yep.
But it didn't work out for some reason, and it was Jack who suggested Scatman Crothers. And I think, from what I understand, Kubrick regretted that choice a little bit.
What do you know why Kubrick?
I'll get into it in a bit.
Okay, sounds great. He did win the Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actor for this movie, so that's one award. And he died at age 76 in 1986 from lung cancer, which he kept a secret so he could keep on working. So just loved the work, and I thought he did an amazing job.
Oh yeah, he's great.
It was really, really great. I will definitely someday watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest again and keep an eye out for him. Just 2 more actors that I saw a few interesting things about. Joe Turkel played Lloyd the bartender. He was in 3 other Kubrick films, The Killing in 1956, Paths of Glory in 1957, and then The Shining. He also played Eldon Tyrell in Ridley Scott's Blade Runner in 1982, which we watched this year, I think. And he retired from acting in the early 2000s after the Blade Runner video game. So he was also in the video game. And then we've got Philip Stone, who plays Delbert Grady. He also appeared in 3 Kubrick films. He was in A Clockwork Orange in 71, Barry Lyndon in 75, and then The Shining. So a couple of Kubrick regulars. He does seem to have inspired a lot of people who kind of worked with him on film to film, both actors and production, right? Like his long-term assistant, who I know, I'm sure we're going to talk about. He did a bunch. He basically was in like he worked with Kubrick for the rest of his life, and he has said that a lot of these rumors were not true. So Leon Vitali, there it is, chief assistant and casting director. That's who it was. There was a lot of stuff from him in what I was looking at. But yeah, that's it. That's all I've got for cast.
You didn't have the twins? The Grady twins?
I might have it in characters.
Yeah.
Instead of cast. Yeah, I do. I had it in characters instead.
Awesome. Well, let me dive into a bit of the production / filming.
Let's do
of
it.
This movie. And I've got a bit more on production design than we usually have, but I think that that's completely warranted in this film. I mean, any good sort of haunting related movie, and this is obviously not your normal ghost story, but
I want to talk about that at some point too.
But it kind of is playing in that field, right?
Yes, 100%.
And any great movie sort of in that realm of horror, you sort of want your set to be another one of the characters, especially if you're talking about the space that the characters are occupying, causing them either harm or trauma or psychological distress.
I have it as a separate character in the character section.
Nice. We don't even talk about this, guys. We don't even plan it. In terms of the filming, the interiors were filmed at L Street Studios in England. Everything was sets. All the interiors are sets. Blows my mind every time. Even when I go back, there was a couple of scenes I wanted to look at before we discussed the movie today, and I'm still blows my mind. Just gorgeous, amazing. So much work that just to think that went into it. I mean, they basically built a hotel inside, kind of. Obviously not a full hotel, but the exterior hotel that you see in the opening and in a couple of establishing shots throughout the film was the Timberline Lodge in Oregon, which, if you notice in those opening aerial shots of the hotel, has no hedge maze because it has no hedge maze. A lot of people online will tell you that's done to, cause you confusion, disorientation. Is disorientation a word?
Yes.
Okay. That just the word disoriented me. And
I think in American English it's disorient, and in British English it is disorientate. And so there is some confusion there.
well, either way, the reason there's no hedge maze in that opening shot is because the hotel doesn't have a hedge maze, the one that they took shots of. Those other intro aerials, gorgeous, right? The film opens up, you're over a lake. That is St. Mary Lake. And the little island is called Wild Goose Island, and that's in Glacier National Park in Montana. And outtakes of this opening panorama was later used by Ridley Scott for the closing moments of the original cut of Blade Runner. He needed a couple like establishing aerial shots. So Kubrick was like, hey, I got some stuff left over from The Shining. You want it?
I didn't even know that was the thing you could do.
Yep. And I, obviously they were sci-fi'd up for Blade Runner, and I'm not sure which shots and if they're still in sort of the cut that I have, which is, I don't know, the cut that's supposed to, I don't know. This is not a Blade Runner episode. If we ever get into sci-fi and have to do Blade Runner, that will have to also be a two-parter. Anyway, the production designer was Roy Walker, who was previously the art director on Barry Lyndon. Do you know the difference between a production designer and an art director?
No.
I did not either, but the production designer is responsible for overall visual concept of the film, while the art director executes that vision and manages the art department's day-to-day operations. So sort of the production designer's promotion from art director. He was the art director on Barry Lyndon, but later he was the production designer on Little Shop of Horrors, Good Morning Vietnam, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Eyes Wide Shut, and The Talented Mr. Ripley. All the Overlook Hotel interiors were constructed on sound stages. The interiors sort of, especially like the Colorado Lounge, which is the main area where Jack set up his typewriter and everything, that was inspired by the interiors of the Ahwahnee Hotel, which is in Yosemite. And the Ahwahnee Hotel and the Timberline Lodge, so the exterior and the interior inspirations, were both designed by the architect Gilbert Stanley Underwood. So there is sort of that connection there. However, the interiors were not a direct recreation. Instead, it was a carefully constructed environment designed to feel believable, expansive, and subtly disorientating.
Success.
Yeah. The hallways were often built wider than standard to accommodate the camera movement. And rooms, like the rooms in the hotel, were fully constructed rather than partial sets. One thing that I saw in one of the featurettes we watched was that and this is something I know that he did for Eyes Wide Shut as well, for some of his sets. He had a scout basically come photograph hotel rooms in the United States at that time, took hundreds of pictures of hundreds of rooms, and Kubrick would go through the photos and be like, I want that room, and I want that room, and I want that room, because he basically felt like why are they going to try to invent the wheel and try to design some crazy hotel room when all these, there's professionals out there who've designed gorgeous hotel rooms. And so basically the hotel rooms you've seen were basically almost directly inspired by a room he saw in this, Rolodex of hotel rooms.
That's so cool.
And lighting obviously was also integrated directly into the set design, which we'll get more into that in Vibe Check next week. The lighting that was integrated into the set design allowed for long continuous camera movement and consistent visual realism. Now on the hedge maze, one thing you didn't mention in terms of the differences between the book and the movie is that in the book, there's these topiary animals that basically become animated, and that's the horror. So there is no hedge maze in the book. I do like the hedge maze for the movie, and obviously in terms of accomplishing the topiary animals would have been very difficult back then. Probably pretty easy now if they were going to redo it. I don't think they completely pulled it off in the TV version of The Shining. They tried, but the hedge maze was constructed as both an exterior set and an interior stage version was created as well, which a lot of especially the end scenes where they're running through and it's all snowy, that was actually the interior stage that was super hot and full of chemicals, both top to bottom, and everybody was miserable, and they were shooting in there all the time. It was really funny. I think you might have been asleep when they were talking about this.
Probably.
But I think it was Roy Walker, maybe the production designer, or it might have been Garrett Brown, the Steadicam guy. They were talking about how at first Kubrick didn't think the maze was that impressive or didn't seem that difficult. So like one Saturday morning, they let him in and basically plopped him in the middle of the set, and he couldn't find his way out. So that kind of, taught him a lesson about that maze, and don't ask questions about your maze. And the maze represents obviously entrapment, confusion, and psychological breakdown. I wanted to touch really quickly also on spatial inconsistencies. That comes up a lot in sort of all of these different rumors and theories, and which is great. But listen, I love conspiracy theories. It doesn't mean I believe them all, but I love them. I believe some of them, maybe. I'm not going to tell you which ones. You're going to have to find my secret page on the internet. I've got a secret page on the internet. Conspiracytheories.com. Damn it. But one thing we know for sure is that the hotel layout, first of all, includes impossible window placements. Did you notice that when we were watching it this time?
No.
I knew to think of it when the first real interior scene is Jack coming in for the interview. And as he's walking to Ullman's office, you very quickly realize that Ullman's office is like an interior room, but he has a window to the outside, which would be impossible. Like where his window is actually like where the hallway would be that Danny is later big wheeling around. There was also mismatched spatial relationships and non-intuitive geography. And there is no confirmed statement from Kubrick explicitly stating that all inconsistencies were intentional. So really kind of the best interpretation that we can do is that some inconsistencies were deliberate. I do think that there were things in there that were meant to be creepy, kind of meant to throw your mind off, make you feel the eeriness of the situation. But others resulted from practical production realities. And there's this rumor that Kubrick was so precise about all of his shots that there's no shots where something's not intentional. But I think that gets misconstrued. And I think here's my interpretation. And this goes back to him being a photographer and being focused mostly on the visual art of it all. I think he wanted every frame to look amazing. And he accomplishes that. And in that sense, I think that every frame is intentional. But I don't think that that means that the consistency or inconsistency is intentional. Like, I think that, like, there's some shots, I didn't catch it, but like where a chair will be there in one shot and it's not in the next shot. I think he was happy with the individual frames he was printing, and it didn't matter to him necessarily if a chair went missing or not, because he took so many takes. Sometimes there's a chair there, sometimes there wasn't. But he took both the performances and the frames that he thought looked best. And in that sense, it was very intentional. But not every single like weird thing in the movie is necessarily meant to be interpreted as meaningful.
I'm trying to figure out if I can use this strategy as it relates to the chaos present in the house. So like, actually, the mess on the dining room table has a meaning. Can I like convince people who visit the house that some of it's intentional and some of it's not? I'm wondering if I could apply that to my life. I think that you're right on about where his priorities were, right? Like what was most important to him when filming these scenes, and it was not continuity. And I think the story helps that along. Like, it's okay if it is confusing. It's okay if it's not all consistent. And so maybe he just was like, whatever. Like if the priority was having like each shot be made into a poster, which it is, which it could be, then it doesn't matter if that chair's there. And he must have laughed his ass off hearing everybody try to find intentionality behind the unintentional.
Now, if you believe that everything is intentional, maybe you're correct. I don't want to offend anybody that loves every moment of every Stanley Kubrick movie. Like, I'm with you. I love the movies too. But I don't necessarily agree that there was meaning in every single inconsistency.
And I did see a quote from Vitaly, his interpreter, or
His interpreter.
his assistant, maybe also interpreter, artist you have to interpret for sometimes. Yeah. I do think that he has said to a lot of these conspiracy theories that they weren't on purpose, that they weren't there, that they're ridiculous. But like, artists also lie. So,
well, that's also really the conclusion that Lee Unkrich came to, at least based on the interview that I heard with him, that a lot of the conspiracy theories were inaccurate, and he's sort of a third party. He didn't have any direct connection with Stanley Kubrick whatsoever. He just wanted to make this amazing book on this movie. So he really didn't have skin in the game onto sort of how to represent it. He was just trying to find as much accurate information as possible.
I do think that talking about intentionality versus intentionality of the creator versus interpretation of the consumer, I think is a really interesting thing to talk about, right? Like if is the meaning in a film based on what the director or the writer or the actors intended, or is the meaning based on what is interpreted by the audience? I mean, this is everything on social media about film. Is people will argue about this all day, right? Like, oh, that meaning's not there. Don't go. It's not that deep. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe they didn't intend to go that deep. We spent an hour and a half or whatever on Slumber Party Massacre a couple weeks ago. Some of that was intentional, some of what we talked about, and maybe some of it is stuff that we put on top of it. But either way, art is seen through a lens from a perspective. So like maybe Kubrick didn't mean for all these things to be, but that doesn't mean that talking about them isn't worth time or valid or valuable. And if it makes you see the world in a different way, or if it makes you feel a certain way, then it doesn't matter if the director intended it, or is that just a side effect of the art that has kind of taken on a life of its own?
Well, and my understanding is that Kubrick was big on the ambiguity and for the audience to seek their own interpretation. So, I mean, I think that was important to him, actually. On shooting conditions, the film was shot in a highly controlled studio environment, allowing Kubrick to maintain full lighting control, repeat scenes extensively, and refine performances and camera movements. The environment also contributed to the long working hours, the repetition, the physical and emotional strain on the cast. And I've got a couple of anecdotes here. I know we're going to be wrapping up here in a little bit, but Joe Turkel, like you said, played Lloyd. He stated in a 2014 interview that they rehearsed the bar scene for over 6 weeks, and that the shoot day lasted from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. So 13 and a half hours to shoot that scene. Turkel said his clothes were soaked with perspiration by the end of the shoot, but also noted it's his favorite scene in the film. I heard a couple of quotes, I think from Matthew Modine's book. Matthew Modine played James T. Joker Davis in Full Metal Jacket, and younger folks out there, you might know him as Dr. Brenner or Papa from Stranger Things. But he was allowed to, during the filming of that movie, Kubrick let him take photos on set and stuff, which is really unusual, especially Kubrick was kind of averse to attention and to, or not necessarily attention, but he didn't like to give interviews, that kind of stuff. But Modine released a book called Full Metal Jacket Diary, basically about his experience filming it. And, kind of what we've heard here, it was extremely hard work, but it was a remarkable experience. And while you're in it, it's so grueling and, you kind of can't wait to be on the other side of it. But he said that once you go on to work on just another film, another project, he said it's so boring. Huh. On the multiple takes, Kubrick was known for requiring many takes, with some scenes exceeding 50 takes. However, not every scene was filmed this way. It's not like there's a couple of things. He was not looking for multiple takes. There was no like specific number he was shooting for. It's not like I do 10 takes and then I move on. It was completely scene dependent. Another thing is extreme take counts you see online are often exaggerated, but so well exaggerated that some of them, it sounds like, ended up in the Guinness Book of World Records. Like you were saying earlier, that shot on the stairs with Wendy and the bat and Jack's coming up at her. People working on the film, one of the crew members had said it was 127 takes. It sounds like it was actually much less than that, but that was like the record for a long time, I guess, if that's accurate. I did not check with Guinness today, but it sounds like only a few years ago they changed it, and that it was actually that they made it the scene between Dick Halloran and Danny over the ice cream, that was like 148 takes, but that's not true either. But even in the documentary we watched last night that Kubrick's daughter shot, Scatman Crothers said it was like 88 takes. And then others have said it was like 60 something takes. So really some of those high numbers are probably exaggerations. He did like to get a lot of takes though.
All of those sound awful to me.
Well, here's the thing. He was not looking for something specific, is also the other interesting thing. A lot of people might think, well, he did 100 takes because he was looking for some very specific thing. But he was looking for three things. Number one, technically correct. That was the first thing he wanted. He believed it was the actor's job to know their lines so well that they didn't have to think about them. And that was something that I guess pissed him off sometimes. And part of the reason he was so frustrated with Scatman Crothers, because on some of those longer sort of monologues by Scatman Crothers, especially with Danny, I don't know if it was that he was ill prepared or just like lines weren't his best, like his strong suit. I'm not sure. But Kubrick believed that if you were coming in here to act on his film, that you needed to know your lines inside and out. The second thing he was looking for after technical correctness was truthfulness. He wanted the performance to come across as real and truthful. But number three, the most important thing, was interesting. So after your performance was technically correct and after it came across as truthful, he was looking for something interesting and sometimes odd. And so that's why, you'll hear that like after 20 or 30 takes, Jack Nicholson was starting to get, a bit delirious. He would do random weird things. And it was often those performances that Kubrick ended up keeping for the film because that's what he wanted. He wanted something different and interesting as long as it was technically correct and truthful first. So I thought that was really interesting. And that's what
really cool.
And you can even see in the ice cream scene with Dick Halloran and Danny how tired they appear, which, plays into the atmosphere of the movie. Just a couple more anecdotes before we end this part one of The Shining. The typewriter pages. The all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy manuscript pages were produced in large quantities, physically typed in multiple formats.
I wrote this down as we were watching because I wrote down someone had to type all of those. Like there was no, like you could tell that those were typewritten, right? Like,
I mean, what else would they do?
I know. It was 1980, but like crazy.
Not only that, but for the European versions, they had also typed up phrases in other languages. It's not that they all said exactly that in whatever language. Like if there were, phrases in like German that fit the bill, they used that.
Oh, that's really interesting.
But that really reflected, obviously, Kubrick's commitment to detail and visual repetition. Did you hear about the fire? I'm sure you must have seen about the fire.
What fire?
The Colorado Lounge fire. I think a couple of parts of the set in February 1979. So almost like around 8 to 10 months into the filming and only a couple of months before they finished. The Colorado Lounge set was completely destroyed in a fire.
I did not hear about that.
And they had to rebuild it, which contributed partially to the extended production timeline. I think I accidentally skipped over. They were supposed to spend 17 weeks on this movie was the projected timeline, and it took around a year to film. So basically 3 times as long as they were supposed to film. And there were other movies that were like waiting to be made, including I think Raiders of the Lost Ark, shot in part at this studio. So there's like a line waiting outside for Kubrick to finish up The Shining.
That's wild.
And obviously it was not all due to this fire. It was, the attention to detail, the takes, just all the crazy sets and long shoots that contributed. But losing the main set about 3/4 of the way through shooting will definitely slow you down for a minute. There's also a famous photo that you can see online of Kubrick laughing in front of the burned down set. And some people think that, there's a conspiracy there, that, he had something to do with it, which doesn't make any sense. I'm sure if I find the right page, I'll find a convincing argument. But the reality is that there was the photographer that was going around taking pictures for insurance purposes who was friendly with Kubrick. They were in the middle of a story or a conversation, and he laughed as they were talking, and he had taken a photo at that moment. And that's just where they were standing. So, but there is a great photo of Stanley Kubrick laughing, which there's not many pictures of him laughing to begin with. But I guess he was quite the family man, though.
Yeah, I did see that.
Like his personal life was very different than his onstage persona. I also heard he really played into the rumors about him. The consensus now is really he was kind of a big nerd, which makes sense.
Yep.
He was kind of intimidated by people like Jack Nicholson. That's why later in his career, he didn't work with too many big stars that he couldn't at least control to some degree.
Except Tom Cruise.
Yeah, except
like
he kind of...
the biggest.
He was able to control him in that shoot, though.
Interesting.
We can't get into it.
We won't. That's such a good movie. I did do a little bit of research because I was interested in his daughter after we watched that documentary, and because she was 17, which is fascinating. But he married an actress who was in... Was she in Spartacus? Was that the one? I can't remember. She was in one of his movies. He married her and adopted her oldest child that she had from a previous marriage. And then they had 3 children, and they were married for many decades, very happily. And she had beautiful things to say about him. And all of his kids seemed pretty neat. I read an article about his family.
And he also chose a lot of what went into her documentary. Like, he approved. He wanted the shots of him being strict and stern, and made her keep out some of the footage of him being warmer on set.
Interesting. That makes sense, though. Artists are so weird. We're so weird. We're just... I think that's part of being a conduit for creativity, wherever creativity comes from, is that you got to be a little bit off for it to come through.
And then I had some other stuff on the Shelley Duvall stuff. We covered pretty much most of that. But one thing that I did notice last night, that when I was doing research today, a major website that does top 10 things you didn't know about this movie got one thing completely wrong out of context. They talked about how there was, the physical strain on Shelley Duvall, which we know is true. But they said that she even started losing her hair, citing the documentary by Kubrick's daughter.
Right.
Which she did. She had lost some hair in the documentary, but it was specifically when she was shooting the scene where she's looking out the window after pushing Danny out when Jack was attacking them. And she says in the documentary, the windowsill pulled my hair out. Like, look at the hair from my window, it wasn't because she was sick. And this article specific.
That's not how I saw it, though. I saw it that because she was sick, her hair came out when it got caught on the window. Like, hair doesn't usually come out that way, but I think it's ambiguous.
Yeah.
Like the fact that you saw it that way, like it was just a physical yanking out of her hair. And I saw it because it was in close relation to when she was talking about being sick and undernourished and like not feeling well. And so it was like, I saw it both ways, but I think that you're right that saying that it fell out because of her illness is not accurate. It's not the whole story.
Yeah, like she's not sitting there just her hair falling out.
Right, exactly.
Things were not all completely miserable for her on set. Her friends in Monty Python came and visited a few times, or at least came for like a nice visit. And also her friend Steven Seagal came.
Amazing.
And he put on a martial arts demonstration for everyone. So it's not like she was miserable the whole time.
I mean...
But you need to get if you're going to be a miserable person in a movie, the best way to do it is to be miserable, I think.
It's true. Even Wendy Torrance wasn't miserable all the time.
And she also pushed back against Kubrick a bit more than other people. It's funny.
I saw that in the documentary, though. Like, I saw tension between them for sure, but I don't
she
think
was
the source
questioning
was
about
him.
like lines and stuff like that. When Jack, remember at the beginning, sort of, he was talking about, he was like, I like it when the director is in control and the character's like not me at all. Right?
Right. He seemed very happy and willing to do that, which I think is why he got the performance that he got. And and isn't that funny that Kubrick wanted Shelley Duvall because she was mousy and submissive, and she turned out to not be that way. And so she pushed back more than Jack Nicholson, whose character is certainly a lot more brash and authoritative and dominant than Wendy. So cool. Yeah, this 2-episode format was a good idea.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think that's all I have on sort of the production. If I come up with anything before the next episode, I'll find a place to sneak it in. But next time we're going to we'll do a little introduction, but then we'll jump into vibe check.
Right into vibe check and story time. Yeah, I think that's great.
As for today's episode, let's take a quick break and then close it out.
Cool.
We're losing light on this part 1 of The Shining. We don't have any wheels to spin. I know what we're watching next week. Well, we already watched it. It's The Shining Part 2.
Yes. And sorry, if you were hoping for a song this week, you're going to have to wait till next week.
And if you hate the songs, this is the best episode you've ever listened to. You can find us where?
On the internet. Heard of it?
Right next to my conspiracy theory website. Right next to it. What you do is you go to my conspiracy website and then you do you slide. You have to have a touch screen and you do a little slide. A little slide. A little slide.
I'm just waiting to see how far you're going to take it.
I could take it very far. It's late.
I know you could.
And this production has just been grueling.
Grueling. You're just getting crazy. We've done so many takes. We're OMNLD Pod on all of your internet social media places, including website, omnldpod.com. Send us an email if you'd like. Give us some comments. We love to hear from you. And we're so happy that you're hanging out with us. So please let us know that you're there. And if you know anybody who likes this, send it along to them.
That's right. Sharing with one person, each one of you listening right now, could make a world of difference. I want everybody listening. I want everybody who loves this stuff to listen.
I was going to say, if you want everybody to listen, we probably picked the wrong genre.
No. I definitely don't want everybody to listen. That's for sure.
No, we want people to listen who enjoy this kind of stuff. And we know they're out there because we find them on the internet all the time. And occasionally in real life, which is like the best. If you see somebody with like a horror t-shirt on and it's not Halloween and you're like, hey, they're like, hey, and you're like, yeah. You know, I need more horror t-shirts. That's what that comes down to.
Well, I can't help you with that.
All right, cool. We'll see you next week, though.
Yes, we'll. Yes, we will.
Awesome.
That was my second try at that line.
Seamless.
We sure will do. That's for sure. Oh, man, where's my typewriter? I mean, I am feeling tired and delirious. Let's wrap this up and we'll continue next week.
All right.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
See ya.